Okay, today we're going to do basically the simplest modeling demonstration, which is a revolved surface, the wine glass or bowl demo. But we're doing it in Grasshopper as a parametric system. And I'll produce a series of these tutorials where we do this in different ways so that you can see the effect of structuring your definition differently on the design logic of the parametric family. I'm going to start with a point, and I'm going to get a point parameter, and I'm going to call it origin. And I could draw a point in Rhino, but instead I'm going to use the construct point, which constructs a point from 3 coordinates, x, y, and z, and the default is 0, 0, 0. So the first thing that I'm going to need is I'm going to need an axis to revolve around. So to do that, I'm going to take my point and I'm going to move it. I'll go to transform and affine, Euclidean, move, and I want to move it in z. So I will get under vector, a component that creates a unit z vector, and we can give that. It actually doesn't really matter how tall our axis is. Let's just make it 100 units. So you can see over here in our front view, right, our origin and the top of the axis. And if I go to curve line, I can make a line from the origin to this new top point, and I'll dump that to a parameter, a curve parameter, and we'll call this axis. Okay, now the next thing I want to do is I want to make a series of points that I can use to create a curve. And for each one of those points, I'm going to start with the origin. So I'm just going to connect my origin to another point parameter just to give myself some space in the definition. So what I want to do is I want to move the origin, and I want to move it in x and z. So again, if I go to transform Euclidean and I get a move, I'm going to move my origin. And first I want to move it in x, so I'm going to get a vector, the unit x, and I'm going to give that its own parameter, which is going to be called, let's call this width, and let's hook up a slider. So I'm going to double click on the slider here, set it to be only integers, and set it to be able to go from 0 to 100. Right, so now when I slide my slider, you can see I get my new point, which is moved. But I also want to be able to move it in z. So again, if I go to vector and I get a unit z, and this time I'm gonna cheat. I'm gonna copy and paste because the slider is already set up to go from 0 to 100, and I'm gonna call that height. And this is gonna govern the height of my new point. So now that I moved it in x, right, I'm going to take the point that I moved in x, and now I'm going to move it in z. Right, so this controls the z, this controls the x, and I'm just going to turn the preview off on that move, and I'm going to dump this to a point parameter. Maybe I'll turn the preview off and hit the space bar and hit the little blindfold guy, and call that new point. All right, so now I have a little assembly that will take as an input my origin point, and we'll move it in x, and we'll move it in z. All right. So maybe what I want to do now is just take this whole thing, and if I hit Control G, that'll make it a group. Doesn't really do anything except put a box around it, but that's sometimes useful. And then I'm going to copy and paste. And now I can do it for second point. And again, if I copy and paste, now I can do it for the third point. Right? So now that I have my 3 points, if I bring that to a new point parameter and then I hold down Shift, and bring that to a new point parameter and I hold down Shift again. Now into this point parameter, I now have 3 points. And let's call this points list. Right, so something that's really useful is under display, if you say point list, and I put that parameter into that, and I set the size to be a little bit bigger, like maybe 2, you can see, oops, let's make the size even bigger. Let's make it 6. Right, you can see that my points list will now put numbers next to my points. Right, so if I want to add another one, Control C, Control V, hold down Shift. All right, now you can see that my other point's on top of that point. Maybe I need to make my maximum a little bit higher on the slider. Right, so that's my point list. Now if I want to take that point list and make it into a curve, under Curve and Spline, here's NURBS curve. NURBS curve will take my points and use them as the points to a NURBS curve. You could also look at Interpolate. We use this one. That will also take a list of points and make a curve, but you'll see the Interpolate curve passes through every one of the points. There are 2 different ways of doing the same thing, which have different advantages and disadvantages. So let's use the NURBS curve. It's a little more elegant. I'm going to just turn the preview off on this, and I'm going to send that to a parameter, right? Because it's always good to be able to name things so you know what they are. And I'm going to call this profile curve. Right. So now I have my axis over here. And I have my profile curve. And you know, if you've done regular modeling, you know that that's all you need, right, to be able to make a surface of revolution. So I'm looking here in my perspective window, and under the surface menu, I think it's under freeform revolution. And this takes a profile curve, like my profile curve. It takes an axis, my axis. And it also takes a domain, which is from 0 to 2 pi. So that's basically just telling it to rotate a full 360 degrees. Right? So now I have my vase, or whatever it is. Right? And the nice thing is that if I go back and I change my points, right? My points update, and my point list updates, my curve updates, like if I want to make it skinny in the middle. So one thing you'll notice is that when it starts counting, it always starts counting with 0. It's just something you're going to have to get used to. So if let's make it a smaller base. In any event, right, so if the last thing is my surface, I can get a surface parameter, and we can call that vase. Now, if I want to get this out of Grasshopper and into Rhino, I can hit the space bar and click on the fried egg to bake the geometry, right? Oops, I accidentally baked it twice there, right? And then I can move it. If I change this to a rendered view, you'll see that now, you know, when I change my parameters here, the baked geometry doesn't change, only my Grasshopper geometry changes. Bake that again. I got another version. And that's all there is to it.